Fraser, I'm just going to go through this lit review so that you can keep your notes and improve on this further. So just to start you off, my recommendation is that you really consider a much stronger introductory sentence. So you go straight into one study has shown that within the Olympic Games, okay, I just want you to start with your own personal research. So, something more like this research would like to consider the impact of differences between coaches and players in terms of competitive routines and how this has impacted motivation level. This research is informed by the findings from research by blah, 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 Gold, Guinan, etc. So that you're actually starting your paragraph talking about your own research and why you want to study it, and then talking about the key ideas. So then you go into the key themes and an explanation of the key themes that you want to discuss in your literature review. I think otherwise it's very good, and you've made an attempt there to synthesize ideas, so well done. So I then think that you need to then can go into some of those key themes. So you talk first up about mental preparation and about competitive routines, and maybe talk here about the fact that you're going to look at that within competitive situations and disparities between coach. So the part that the section here that you've put in, this research examines the perceived impact on blah, 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 I would suggest that this little section here needs to go up into the beginning of your lit review. I wouldn't worry too much about the mixed methods approach. So edit this part out and put that into your methodology later on. And I also think that you don't want to overcomplicate it, so you might actually just want to stick to questionnaires. So you might not actually use a mixed method approach, if that makes sense. You might only use questionnaires for your interview. Now, so you can put in here that you found that there has been lacking evidence in more recent years, and then you go into what you have found. As you can see from most of your data here, you found that quite a bit of that is dated. If, for example, your work, especially in psychology, has a seminal piece of work, for example, self-determination theory is one, use the original person that is going to inform that theory or that framework that you're going to use, and put that right at the beginning of your lit review. So ignore the ideas around methodological approach here. So, and then moving on, that the previous studies let 12 months pass before, I think, okay? And again, you're talking about gaps in the methodology in terms of assessing things a year later. Obviously ignore that. So what I want you to do is think about more about what are the key themes that you're going to do. You've only got 1,300 words, so make sure that your lit review actually just underlines the key themes that you're going to introduce, which is competitive routines, high motivation levels, and mental preparation. Possibly also are you going to look at goal setting. So I'm reading this part here and there's quite a lot in there. So can you make sure that your literature review has just a few key themes that you're really going to delve into depth? You're not trying to cover everything in your research. So moving on, in terms of multiple studies conducted on environment, great. Just make sure that you've got an explanation in there of what we mean by environment, and just a clarification of that, just so that somebody for reading it from the outside also understands what that is environment and what are the multiple factors that impact it. So moving on. Make sure you read and get your spelling, because manage is very different from manage. So just have a little bit of that. And make sure you're not just mentioning, you're doing an explanation, and then you are then discussing why is that relevant, why is that impactful for your own research. Don't worry about the data collection, etc. So this is one of your key areas that you're going to really discuss, is this idea by Gould and coaches' perceptions of effectiveness and variables. And then I want you to relate that and say this is highly relevant to your research, because you want to look at what are the differences between coaches' perceptions and players' perceptions. So have a think about that. Showing the congruence between coach and athlete, and always read that over a little bit, and maybe add in here some ideas around coach player alignment. So looking at these themes, okay, so remember these themes here are just listed. I want your literature review to have a real explanation of how they're going to impact your own research. Try and find some literature to support your idea here on tournament experience, on participant background, etc. Good, talking about mental skills and mental preparation. Make sure you're not listing, make sure you're actually explaining what these are fully, okay? And then I think in terms of physical factors, you need to discuss that you're only looking at perception of physical readiness rather than actually looking at physical factors, if that makes sense. So make sure that you're just discussing, your research will only be looking at perceptions of physical factors. And then moving on to plan and organisation. Again, you need to have that full explanation there. So moving on to factors influencing team performance. Make sure again that you're talking about here how this impacts your research, and how this will be one of your key themes, how players and coaches might have different ideas of the level of importance of personal and situational factors. I really like this idea around effective coach-athlete relationship, and I think you should just extend that further. So if you look again, you're going through open door policy, honesty, trust and respect, etc. You're listing. Make sure that we have explanations of what you're trying to discuss here. Good. Sophia Jowett is key area, so you might want to bring this idea around alignment much earlier on into your introductory ideas, because your research really is about the differences between perceptions of coaches and players. So actually alignment is probably one of the key ideas that you need to be considering. Again, make sure you're going through full explanations rather than just listing, and then talk about how that impacts what you're considering for your own research. This is good. There's lots of reading done. I just want you to be really aware that you need to not be listing. It really needs to be full explanation. Good use of the, here you talk about similarly, so you're starting to make links between research. Make sure you have criticality, make sure that you're demonstrating that, you know, this strongly suggests that, arguably this provides evidence that, etc. So that you're actually demonstrating your own perspective as well, not simply just regurgitating the literature that you've read. So when you're doing this, make sure you've got a clear idea in your head. What are the key themes and what are the things that you think are most pertinent to your research? Because your research is going to have a questionnaire, there's lots and lots of things. But from the research that you've done, what are the key things that you really think are most important for coach-player alignment of perceptions and expectations, etc.? And so your reading is great. At times you're a little bit listing. Make sure you have a full explanation. Make sure that you are saying why that's relevant to your research, and also just pull out key themes. Remember, your dissertation is not trying to answer absolutely everything.